I feel like in the last few years, a bunch of words just kind of stopped meaning what they used to mean. Social media isn't all that social. Our phones are hardly ever used as phones. And TV is something I mainly now watch on my laptop. And recently, I've started to feel the same way about the word podcast. Podcasts used to be the things I listened to while I walked my dog or cleaned the house. But now that word has just gotten so much bigger and more confusing. Podcasts can be audio. Podcasts can be live streams of two celebrities. Podcasts can be a 6-hour conversation with Elon Musk. But the biggest change is that more and more often when my friends tell me about a podcast they liked, they're not actually talking about audio. They're talking about a YouTube video that they watched. And trust me, the irony is not lost on me that a lot of you are watching me say these words into a camera and not just listening to me. So is the word podcast even useful anymore? Do we need a new word for audio podcast and video podcast? I recently put these questions to PJ Vogt, host of the audio-only podcast Search Engine, and someone who's thought a lot about how all of this has changed in the last few years.
I was in India recently, and the traffic there is like nothing you've ever seen. And there was this guy in one of those auto rickshaws, which seems like one of the most perilous possible jobs. And he's weaving in between all these fast moving cars, and everyone's driving pretty aggressively. And below the steering terminal of this thing, he had a video podcast on. And in my mind, I was like, terrifying. And he was somehow able to do it. And in my head, obviously people have all sorts of engagement with this new media, but in my head, that was what I don't love about it. We think we're going back to television because it's speech and moving images. But I think, at least right now, for most people, video podcasts are this strange thing where you're making something that people are sometimes going to pay deep attention to and sometimes pay shallow attention to. And it's strange, audio podcasts also, to your point, it is often something people do while they're doing something else. But it just, I don't know. Everyone who has a form of media always seems to have found the perfect one that's better than all the others. And I don't want to be a podcast chauvinist or an audio podcast chauvinist. There are art forms that always seem to be dying and never die, like the novel. And then there's things that really do die, like disco mostly went away. I don't know if I'm making the novel or disco or neither. But I know I really love it. I love it as a consumer. I love it as a producer. If there's a way to do it next year, I will be doing it. If there's a way to do it the year after, I will.
I want to start with something I think that should sound simple, but weirdly has sort of become surprisingly elusive and slippery. And that is, what is a podcast?
It's a great question. A few years ago, I could have told you. A few years ago, I would have told you that a podcast is a lot like radio, in that it's an audio-only medium. But unlike radio, you can listen to whatever you want, whenever you want, and it can be sort of like any form and have any content because it doesn't have broadcast standards. And then someone put moving images on podcasts, and now there's a sort of
damn them.
I know, it's a real.
I went into
sacrilege.
podcast thinking I never have to worry about my hair and makeup again. It was so good for about 5 minutes.
I agree. I really enjoyed that 5 minutes. And now we're in this weird, spooky, uncanny moment where sometimes when people say podcast, they're talking about something you watch. And sometimes, although I guess diminishingly so, when people talk about podcasts, they still mean something you listen to. And so it's what is complicated is that to say that something is a podcast is both referring to the kind of media form, the same way we would say TV is something that we watch on TV. But you're also kind of referring to a genre. There's certain expectations you have, even if those expectations are shifting. But it's strange for me because I am counter trend. Both what I make is audio only and most of what I consume is still audio only. And I also think for me, audio podcasts create a kind of intellectual space that I like. They can be thoughtful, they can be discursive, they can be very narrow and wonky. And I'm not saying video can't do those things. But I think it works really well in audio. And for me, until or unless I figure out how to do that in video, I'll stay here.
So does it change then, do you think, the listener experience? Because you talk about audio is more intellectually satisfying. Why is it suddenly less intellectually satisfying to see you sitting in front of a microphone as opposed to just listening to you?
It's funny. I'm like just tempted to make a joke about my own appearance, like that I somehow have just an intellectually unstimulating face or something. I don't think it has
I
to
don't know.
be.
The black T-shirt is kind of on the trend.
It's very
you know.
intellectual.
It's like sort of Sartre-esque.
It's very nice of you to say. I think that. What do I really think? I don't think that once you see a face, somehow your ability to absorb complex information decreases or something like that. I do know that. I think for the conversation, I think that there is something nice. For me, there's a different kind of listening I do. Oftentimes when I do interviews, I'll ask to turn the camera off. Not always, but often. There's something about just listening to voices. A voice in a conversation carries a lot of information. You notice things when you. It's almost like the therapeutic environment. You know, you can shut your eyes and you can absorb all of it. And faces and fashion also communicate a lot of information. And I just like stripping that information away. I like talking to somebody who is not thinking about how their face looks on camera. I like how, maybe this is just a story I tell myself, but that in the interviews we do, it is possible sometimes for fleeting moments for the guest to forget that they're being recorded, you know, to talk authentically and honestly. And when I talk to people who do what I do in video and who do it well, I think they pull it off, but what they will tell me every single time is that the presence of a camera, often the presence of a crew, it just creates more obstacles to the thing that they're trying to make.
So I would say yes, and yes to all of that. I mean, I noticed also that when we're recording this, you don't look into camera very much.
I have not trained myself to do it.
You're sort of trying to look everywhere else, and it's actually weirdly effective. But I can see that if I was a psychologist, I'd be saying, this person does not want to be on camera. They're trying to negate themselves from the image. But this is not a podcast about psychology.
I'm going to learn how to do this in this conversation that we're having.
We're going to stare at each other. But I do think, when I was growing up in journalism, I spent years being a radio journalist and then became a television journalist. And I noticed that suddenly bringing a television crew along quantifiably changed the nature of the interviews, that people froze up, they got anxious, that kind of thing. I don't know if it's the money or the fact that the medium has changed and video has been added, but I feel I'm listening to fewer podcasts now because the whole medium feels slightly like a tsunami that's about to hit me. And I don't know where to find the ones I want. I don't know. There are so many more of the kinds of things I'm interested in. And how do consumers of this medium, how do ordinary listeners navigate this moment? Do you have any great top tips on how I can carry on enjoying this medium without feeling totally swamped by it?
That's a great question. Sometimes I joke about in New York City where I live, they sort of made cannabis legal without putting a lot of restrictions on cannabis stores. Like the licensing thing just didn't work. And so suddenly every block had like 3 cannabis stores.
I have like 5 within 100 yards of my house.
It's completely crazy. It's starting to calm down a little bit. But podcasting feels like that to me. It's like a business that is hard because it seems easy to everybody. And so there's a lot of people in the space. And as a consumer, it's hard. It's like there's sort of too many stores. I mean, this is part of the story of why it's going to video, is because video algorithms are a filter. You can scan TikTok or scan Instagram Reels and get a clip of someone. And if you find them interesting, you can follow them back to like their video podcast. For audio podcasts, for the thing I like, there's a little bit of criticism. You can sort of check the best podcast list of a given year. As a person who makes stuff, obviously, I'm always arguing with the critics in my head, but I think they do their job well. Audio shows will try to promote each other. So my show, Search Engine, if we find a new show we're excited about and we put it down our feed, we tell our listeners about it. But it is hard to find, for me, as a person who really cares about finding great audio, it's hard. And it reminds me of like most things on the internet. The internet right now is very good at catering content that it thinks you want to see or that you won't stop watching to you. Like everything is delivered before you know you want it. Podcasts are slow. It's like trying to find a cool bookstore or a record in the 90s. I have no choice but to say that is a feature because it is also a bug that we've not been able to fix.
I feel like we are living in an age where the kind of definition of things kind of very quickly changes because we're living in a fast-paced world. So, you know, social media used to be social. It really isn't social anymore. It's just an algorithm. And podcasts used to be one thing. And already this new media, which is barely a decade old, has already kind of outlived its original definition. Do you and your friends, when you talk to them, feel sort of confused maybe by this rapidly changing environment in this space of podcasts and what it's becoming and what they are becoming? And do you sort of ever think, how am I supposed to digest what this medium is?
Yes, I think people are profoundly confused. I mean, podcasting's funny because it started out insecure. At the beginning of narrative podcasting, when, like at least in the circles where I existed, everyone was constantly thinking about how it wasn't radio, and people would sort of talk about what they were doing as radio because podcasting as a new thing felt inherently cheaper and cheesier. And it somehow went from the anxiety of being too new and young to the anxiety of worrying that it's too old and irrelevant with no middle period of just sort of artistic confidence. So people are nervous. The story I tell myself is that sometimes the least interesting time to be working in art form is at the moment where all the money shows up. That in the beginning, before the rules are written, you can do whatever you want. And later, when the money and attention has cooled, you can also do whatever you want. There are times that are really open to experimentation. And it's weird. I've actually noticed as a listener more things lately that surprised me formally than I've experienced in a little while. And so I don't know. The story I'd say to other people in this space is that sometimes a little less money and a little less attention is not the worst thing for people making something, which is not something they find persuasive.
PJ, you've done very well. It's been a pleasure to see your face and listen to your voice.
Thank you for having me.